Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to the talk of the record. Today we have with us extremely talented, a profound poet, writer, and professor of psychology. She's a former chair of the Department of Liberal Arts and director of the BA Psychology program in the College of Undergraduate Studies at John F. Kennedy University. We have the honor of having Susan West today with us. She will be sharing some of her experiences about her, the teaching experience that, she is expert in psychology. She taught in several courses in the John F. Kennedy University and the College of Professional Studies and all. And she also has this develop a numerous process. That is what I came to know. We would be knowing about that, and she also has this award-winning poetry books. Let us try to get to know more about uh, these things from her. Okay, Susan, let me ask you how to help yourself while helping others. That is what you have been researching, you have been giving lectures on, and the kind of programs and the process that you uh, mentioned. That was what you call and to be private setting and government setting, community organizations. Would you highlight, would you enlighten us regarding that?
I'm happy to. It's been a very important, both in my professional and my personal life, when my daughter was diagnosed with her severe illnesses. I started to get really lost in the caregiving, consumed by it. It was taking over my life because her conditions were very serious. And a friend of mine who was a therapist friend pulled me aside and said, Suzanne, you are losing yourself. And if you can't start focusing on self care for yourself, do it for Heidi. She was so strong about it. And I just turned things around from that moment on. And I started just taking care of myself more, connecting with friends, reading other things, writing more poetry instead of being obsessed. And then I learned so much about self care and about boundaries and ways to really enhance self care, creativity and writing and somatic work, that I applied for a grant to be able to teach self care to, initially, it was professional caregivers, nurses, doctors, and therapists. And so I led workshops as a result of the grant, teaching people the incredible importance of self-care. It really needs to be at the top of the list if you are either a family caregiver or a professional caregiver, because it completely affects the quality of care that you're able to give. And then I wrote a book that came from all these different workshops and started working with family caregivers. And the book is called Soul Care for Caregivers: How to Help Yourself While Helping Others. And it's been life-changing for me, and continues to this day. My daughter has 4 children. One of them has special needs. One of them has one of her diseases. And it's very tempting to get lost in all of that, but I don't, because I integrate self-care with all of my caregiving. Yeah. I can't hear you right now.
Yeah.
Oh,
I get to learn, when you use the term spiritual dimension of caregiving, what exactly it is. I know what if you could define psycho-spiritual dimension.
in terms of caregiving, because I talked about it in the
Exactly.
beginning of my reading. So, psychospiritual means the marriage or the integration of the psychological and the spiritual. So, for example, the exercises I created, the things I taught in the workshops and have in the book, are different tools to help people access. For example, I have a whole focus and I've taught classes on accessing your intuition as a caregiver, bringing ways, techniques to bring your questions about your family member or about your stress, about anything, not to that worrying, overthinking mind, but to that divine wisdom. And there's so many ways to access that intuition. So that's one very important tool that I give people. And as a result of that, when they start practicing it, they're really opening to spirituality, to source, because they're not turning to their egoic identity, they're turning to the divine, to boundless wisdom many times a day sometimes, and they start opening more spiritually. I also the psychological issues. I have a whole chapter in and would teach exercises on boundaries, the incredible importance of boundaries, and teach about what codependence means and getting so lost in the other person and trying to fix them and change them and how detrimental that can be. So, how to and those are all psychological ideas and then just how to deal with the traumatic experience of being a caregiver and the importance of being with feelings and different ways to access feelings. So all of my work around caregiving has been an integration of the psychological and the spiritual. I can't hear you again. You're muted.
Okay, let me
There
ask
you
you
go.
let me ask you what was your kind of challenging situation when you are in giving care, caregiving.
Oh, with my daughter, you mean? When I
No,
was a
in
caregiver?
general, in general, in general.
Oh, in general. Well, it was even when I was starting to see clients when I was in a counseling internship. And uh, my supervisor watched me in some sessions through one of those two-way mirrors because I was getting exhausted at the end of the day. And she watched me and she said, Suzanne, you are a classic merger. Yes, you're an empath and you're open, but you are taking on the difficulties and the feelings of your clients. I mean, you're absorbing things emotionally and you're also taking on too much responsibility. And so, for the rest of the time that I was in the internship, she had me go to Al-Anon meetings and work on enmeshment in my family and basically and she taught me how to have boundaries. It was life changing. It was she was kind of like a Zen master, with the stick. Um, but I healed, I don't know, 80 to 90% of all the wounding that had me merging too much with people. And I really learned boundaries. So when I would teach boundaries to people, um, I was speaking from experience.
Exactly. But let me also ask you about, how do you manage yourself when you are, it's a kind of situational psychological issues where you deal with, and the emotional kind of upheavals, that is, the kind of steps and ties that, you you try to counsel, or try to, you know pass through the, like, to the other person. I mean, it's like you manage the things, but about that, how would you yourself balance? I mean, there is a
With
line of
myself, you mean?
exam. There is a line
Oh,
of
so how?
there is a line of demarcation. Like you said, there is a boundary. You set a boundary. So what it is exactly,
Between me and other people and with my time and everything else. I really have boundaries.
and the
But are
balance?
you
How do
asking?
you balance? You meditate, or you
Oh,
just sit.
oh,
Ideally, you listen to the music. In order to,
okay,
stress bursting. That is what I mean.
okay. Well, one thing is foundational for me, and I call it following the yeses. So from morning till night, no matter where I am, when not every second, I make numerous decisions and choices from my rational mind, but I really let myself be guided by my own boundless wisdom. So, some of the things that I do to take care of feelings and to connect with source are definitely meditation, walking, being in nature. I do a lot of art. I read a lot. I read a lot of poetry and spiritual poetry. I write. Um, but so I make time for what I call wavy line time. It's hours of every day, which I'm able to have, that are all about just following what feels right to me. And so I listen, if I'm going to read, is it a yes to read poetry, or is it a yes to read some fiction? Is it a yes to do my art now? What kind of art? So I'm kind of always following that. And so I'm in the flow a lot because I'm in sync with being. And then I also try to be that when I'm outside of my wavy line time. When I'm playing with my grandkids, I'm not thinking about and trying to control it. Well, this is what we're going to do. I'm kind of asking myself, what do they need? What do I need to ask them?
Mhm.
But yes, self-care has become imperative in my life. And in terms of dealing with feelings, I've done
Exactly.
so much of my own therapeutic work with trauma, that I really know how now to, when there's a feeling there, to let it be there. And I know how to not get lost in it. And so I know I can sense when it's time to separate from the feeling and not be overwhelmed by it, which is a huge danger,
Mhm.
especially if you are a person who has a lot of trauma.
Exactly.
You want to be very, very careful, um, not to just go digging towards the deep feelings if someone has a lot of trauma. So again, it's a dance, it's a balance.
Right.
And I do
So
that with myself.
it's very difficult. See, unless you have the, kind of, have a, kind of balancing self. That the caregiving also, in the process of caregiving, you get lost in, losing yourself, and you get
Yes,
exhausted and tired, and the trauma in turns affects you. That is what I, believe. So the balancing of yourself, the soul care, that is what, for the caregiving, that
Yes,
you also have to maintain your, piousness and the calmness, like, kind of,
absolutely, because it's really felt. People who are ill or hurting
uh,
emotionally or physically are very, very sensitive to
the more
where
you
people
get
are
attached,
coming.
the more you get attached to that, the problems, the others you have, the more you get, involved, and the more you get, sucked up. So there is a need of detachment, kind of
Oh,
moving away, from this thing, and, retaining
it's
your,
huge.
it is composing yourself and, being yourself, and, retaining your this, kind of, your being is very important to have this energy to serve more. That is what I believe. Let me ask you, how do you,
Extremely.
let me
There's
ask
one
you,
other thing I'd like to say when you were talking about detachment. For me and in my teaching with others over the years, it's very important to learn how to detach from the thinking mind. That's where most of the problems are. And we are such a thinking identified culture that most people are governed by the mind. So it shows up in a lot of my poems, the limitations of that and the importance of not being governed by that.
how do you, what was your first reaction when you got the, when you got to know about the, you've been selected for the Distinguished Teaching Award at a Harry L. Morrison's, kind of a teaching award. What was your first reaction?
My first reaction was shock, like, what? You know, and then how beautiful, and how wonderful. So I had, everything from not being able to feel anything to just feeling grateful and humbled and happy. And yeah, it was very, very beautiful. And it made my family very happy and my friends. Yeah.
Maybe it is fulfilling, kind of,
What?
it's a maybe a feeling of fulfilling, kind of, you know,
Oh,
a job.
yes. Yes, because I've always, even when I was very, very, very young, I mean, it turned my bedroom into a classroom and a hospital. And I was constantly teaching all the little stuffed animals and dolls and fixing them. And that's what I ended up doing. But yes, I've been teaching since I'm very little. I
Mm.
love teaching. And so getting that award was very meaningful.
No, teachers like you would leave a remarkable or indelible mark, in my sense, the kind of the experience that you have, it would be a kind of lesson, a kind of learning for the youngsters, the coming generations to come. So, in this context, what would be your suggestion, or what would be your kind of guidance to the generations, or kind of youngsters, or like us, if you
Who
could.
want to be teachers? Is
No,
that what you mean?
in general, with your experience, you could just give some advice or suggestion,
Some advice? What do you mean? For living or for dealing with difficulties? Or
dealing
I'm
with
not,
difficulties, and kind of mental care, the psychological balance, kind of things and all.
oh, I see. So just some kind of little tips or guidelines for younger people?
Exactly, exactly.
Hmm. Well, I have two teenage grandchildren, so all right. So let me see what comes to me. One of the first things that comes to me is to um, follow what feels good and true to you, that you're going to have all kinds of people, family and friends telling you who you should be and what you should do and what the right thing is. And not that you should listen to other people, but really learn how to listen to yourself and what in your depths and your heart you really want to do and what makes you happy and keep following that. So that's one thing I would say. Another thing I would say is don't be afraid of your feelings. This culture and maybe your family and friends are not really schooled in teaching young people how to have their feelings. You know, young people get a lot of messages like, oh, it's no big deal, or just smile. And you have all kinds of feelings. And having a lot of feelings and not having a way or a belief that you should even express them or looking for support is part of what leads to addictions of all kinds. Social media addictions, drug addictions, alcohol addictions, because those are ways to not feel. And they're ways to elevate your mood. So I would really encourage young people to recognize that feelings are okay and start talking to their friends about feelings or trusted adults, to not be afraid of that. And is that enough for now, or do you want me to say more?
Yeah. Hope these few tips, very insightful tips would be helpful in betterment of lives to the young generation. Not only young generation, and even for the kind of matured adults too. So with
Oh,
this,
of course.
yeah.
All of that, what I just said, also applies to adults.
Exactly. So with this insightful conversation with Honorable Ms. Susan West, I would like to say, sign off, and I'll see you with another order. Thank you, my dear friends. Thank you, man.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.